I knew I was in for an interesting.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to What You Didn't Know with myself, Marcus Bethay, the owner of C3 Wellness, alongside Dr. Orman, an acupuncturist here at C3 Wellness.
How's everybody doing?
Would you mind introducing the topic?
Yeah, I wanted to say something, if I may, beforehand.
Go
We
right
have
ahead.
two wonderful people who spent a whole lot of time setting this stage up, and Gabby and Roland. Roland, I don't get to talk to very much. I talked to him about 2 months ago,
Mm,
and I didn't know he was military, and I didn't know he has this background in film. And it's amazing how many people that I met, such as Roland, whose skills are off the chart,
correct.
and yet they're extremely humble. And when I hear that, especially working at a health facility,
Hmm.
I hear patient comes first, not ego.
Correct.
And so it's wonderful to have people, not only the two individuals, both, some of them work at the front desk, some of them work with patients, that put people first. And we notice that consistently here, and patients say that quite a bit. And it's nice to be a part of this.
I agree. It's definitely a diverse group of people with multiple skill sets. So it's good to have people who have multiple things that they can bring to the table. It
Yes.
makes the whole situation and the environment here a whole lot better to work for.
Yeah, and it makes everybody's job easier
That too.
because the combinations, 1 + 1 = 3, that type of thinking works out. And we notice it quite a bit.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay. So fast forwarding, this week we were going to talk about the power of words. Sometimes our words can either be to our benefit or our detriment, depending on one, what is said, and two, the energy and emotion behind it.
Yeah,
Can you explain that a little
sure.
further?
Sometimes the topic is presented by the patients that we see this morning. And somebody this morning said, I like to cut this off because it hurts.
Mm,
And it kind of like, I felt like that type of reaction. I understood what they were saying. Nobody wants to be in pain. Nobody likes pain.
mm,
And they just want to get rid of it sometimes, anyhow, anyway. There was an interesting study by a Japanese researcher named Emoto. And Dr. Emoto got 2 glasses of water. And in the one glass, he wrote the word hate. In the other glass, he wrote the word love. And it was just water in a glass, and left him aside for 24 hours. After 24 hours, he got a drop and put it of the one that said hate, put it under a microscope. And it was this like ugly yellow color with all these jagged edges, and it reminded me of if somebody said, go ahead and walk across broken glass. Like,
mm,
it repelled you just by looking at it.
mm.
And then he took the slide off and got a second slide and put one drop of the water that said love. And it was this beautiful sky blue. It looked like a combination of icicles and snowflakes. It was artwork.
Mhm.
And the moral of the story was, what is our body primarily made of? Water. So our words have a tremendous impact on what we are saying.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times when we hear somebody say that, it's like, no, well, let's go ahead and figure this out a little bit. We have the tools that can help alleviate a lot of your suffering.
Correct.
Your conversation with yourself is going to be the key to get the rest of it going.
You're absolutely right about that. And one thing I can speak to as far as here at C3 Wellness, a lot of our therapists, the morale is high. So if the morale is high, the energy is positive, and then when we're bringing the clients into that environment, they also experience that positive vibe, and it kind of helps aid in their health and their healing to kind of accelerate it until the next time they have to come back in.
That you're saying the word vibe, and I don't know if you mean it as kind of a metaphor or literal, but there is a literal aspect to it.
Mm,
You put a tuning fork at XYZ hertz or a note, and you
mhm.
bring in others, and pretty soon all of the tuning forks will be at the same note. And I
Correct.
think people are like that too. You can elevate somebody's mood, or you can bring them down. And I know that there are times when everybody has days when nobody's consistently 365 days a year, but once we get here and we put the uniform on, so to speak,
Hmm.
you don't have the luxury of being that way.
True.
And so you you literally talk yourself into a good mood if you're having one of those days, and that elevates treatment levels also.
Okay. When it comes to clients that come in here with negative thought processes, what is it that you feel you do to try to help them overcome that mindset?
I think number one, and I think everybody does it extremely well here, is that they listen to people.
Hmm.
And listen as in, oh yeah, yeah, what's the symptom? No, no, tell me about you. What is
Correct.
your background? Where are you from? What do you like? So you get to know a person as a person, not as a patient.
Correct.
Or maybe as a person first and then a patient.
Hmm.
And I think that is very helpful because there are 1,000 ways to communicate now, but somewhere in those 1,000 ways, we lost the ability to actually listen.
True.
And the second part of that is that sometimes people don't always realize what they are saying until they say it out loud.
Mm.
For example, this hurts and this hurts. Are there anything that makes it feel better?
Hmm.
Wow, I never thought of, oh yeah, doing this and this. So for example, if heat makes things better, what that tells me is that things are stagnant and
Mm.
heat helps movement.
Mm.
Conversely, if somebody says when things are a little cooler, it makes me feel better, that usually points in the direction of the liver. If
Okay.
somebody is stuttering or having a hard time finding their words, I don't know how to say it. That tells me the heart is involved. And when I say the
Mm.
heart, for example, is involved, it doesn't necessarily mean they need to see a cardiologist or anything like that.
Right.
The analogy that I often give is think of it as a muscle literally, and you're doing 50 push-ups, which is good, but really you should be doing 300. So there's that weakness that we get to use words like weakness, and
Hmm.
because of our model of medicine that standard care doesn't really
Take care
acknowledge
of.
or use very often.
Okay. Another topic of conversation we want to kind of delve into was the unknown treatments. Now, I'm not sure exactly how to dive into that, but what is your thoughts on
That's because they're unknown.
that?
Well, we bring a lot of many of us like to read and have a background that covers some strange things, some unique things, and some very powerful things. And today I got to teach somebody how to do what's called image cycling.
Mm,
And there was a sociologist named William Bankston
mm,
who he would inject mice with a toxin where 100% of the time the mice would form a tumor and
mm,
then they would all die, which is horrible. And he taught them this image cycling, which I'll explain in a second. And he taught them to his graduate assistants. And they said, go ahead and do this for an hour. And he injected the same substance into the same type of mice, and 100% of them healed that tumor, and all of them lived.
mm,
And image cycling is a way of thinking, okay, here are 20 things that I want in my life, and they need to be real specific. So you can't just say, and they could be, how do I say, like earthly things. It
mhm,
doesn't have to be this dramatic, spiritual, what have you. A new car, what kind? Needs to be a red XYZ.
mhm,
Okay, so you write this down on an index card. And then you do that for 20 different things. And
mm.
generally, somewhere in there, there's healing of what have you,
Correct.
lower back injury or, hip injury, what have you.
Mhm,
And then you look at the card and you come from the perspective, what does this feel like now that my hip or now that my knee is healed?
mhm.
And so, how does that feel when you look at the card? So,
Correct.
I'm not saying healing, ing, it's ed, healed,
Mm,
even though the person's still going in the process of being healing. And they cycle through each of the cards. And first, you do it at maybe 5 seconds a card,
mhm,
and then 3 seconds. And then you go as fast as you can to the point where your conscious mind can't even keep up with it.
mhm,
And then you memorize everything. And then you burn through 20 of them at like 3 or 4 seconds or 2 seconds. So you can't even consciously comprehend.
mm.
And somehow, some way, that orders that causes the healing to occur.
Mm-hmm.
He is not even sure how it occurs.
Mm.
And he suspects that there's part of the brain called the reticular activating system, which is in the brainstem, where, how would I describe this? You just bought a green car, and now all of a sudden you start to notice there's another green one, just like mine, and there's
Correct,
another one.
yeah.
So the reticular activating system is like the radar that starts to pick up these things.
Okay.
Or you just solved the problem, and now it's 20 minutes later, and you find yourself focusing on what? Another problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if you teach yourself to kind of have that radar tuned to things that are more advantageous to you, you can
Right.
train that reticular activating system to find great things to come into your life spontaneously more often than not.
So kind of like a vision board, so to speak.
I would call it a vision movie, a vision super fast movie, something along those lines. It would be like a cousin to it.
Okay.
It's in the neighborhood, yeah, for
Nice.
sure.
Okay.
So things like that, and you don't hear too often of unique treatments like that.
True.
There's one that I recommend very, very frequently. There is what's known as Bach flower, Bach, BACH flower remedies. And back in the 1920s, there was a physician named Edward Bach who took a principle that, oh boy, went back about 4,000 years or so, that said every disease is a result of suppressed emotion. And he and volunteers purposely would get themselves sick and find a remedy that would be helpful for XYZ condition. And they came up with 37 remedies. And so each of them, and they all have specific either words or phrases associated with it. This is good for fear from known cause, fear, anxiety from unknown cause, obsessive thinking, panic attacks, things like that. And all you do is you put a couple of drops under the tongue, or else in a glass of water, and you sip on it. And it's not like a Valium where 20 minutes later you're zombied. It's one of these things where I always get these panic attacks. This say at 8 a.m.
Right.
And you take a couple of drops. There are no side effects from them.
Okay.
And the end of the day, you kind of come home and you're hanging out and you realize, I didn't have any panic attacks today. Or I started to get one, but it wasn't so bad. I kind of talked myself off the edge and it was kind of easy. So it's almost like a shadow. It's sort of there and you don't realize it, but it helps.
Okay.
There are also different types of mental and emotional aspects to acupuncture points and herbs that aren't taught in school. That we have access to, that we've used with patients, and that we continue to. And there's something very rewarding about that.
That's all right.
Because it's like the little secret, and now you shared it, and then it works so well. And like, how did you do that? I'm like, I didn't do it. Your body did it.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah, definitely. One of the remedies I would not recommend that some people do is to put a drop of Crown Royal or Hennessy under the tongue to make them feel better, to alleviate their stress and make them happy. Yeah, I know that could work from time to time, but it's not the healthiest route. So definitely suggest your route better than the alternative. So that concludes our episode this week of What You Didn't Know. Again, my name is Marcus Bethay, the owner of C3 Wellness, here with our acupuncturist, Dr. Orman. Make sure that you follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next week.